Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest. We ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran who hates vinyl because you grew up with it and know its limitations, or else a scrappy upstart who hates digital music and longs for the good old days of vinyl, this is your show, either way, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. What's up, everybody? It's the last Friday of July 2018, the dog days of summer, and I'm glad that you're here cooling off with us at the podcast. Thanks to everyone who came out to my shows in the Southeast this month. I had a great time seeing you guys in Carolina, in Virginia, in Georgia. I got to see Dave and Suze from David Wax Museum and hang with their kids. I got to meet BJ Barham's new daughter in Wendell, North Carolina. Much different from touring in my 20s. Touring in my 20s was basically just driving across the expanse of America in like a poorly maintained passenger van with various bottles of, like open bottles of Ryder whiskey clinking around in the storage bay. Touring in my 30s so far seems to be more characterized by like eating cauliflower rice and meeting babies. So it's not exactly the vibe I signed up for when I got into this line of work many years ago, but that's fine. No point in fighting it. I'm going to ride with it, man. Here's where I'm going to be coming up in the next few months. August 23rd in the Bay Area, Novato, California, playing a concert for Casey Turner. September 5th at the Tractor Tavern in Seattle, the 6th in Portland, and then I'll be at the Sisters Folk Festival that weekend. And then September 23rd, I'm playing a festival in Indianapolis. If you are a listener of this show, but you've never heard my tunes before, we should rectify that. And a good place to do that is over at Spotify. So go over there, just search the words Intro to Joe Pug, and a playlist will come up with about 10 of my songs collected from different albums over the years that will give you a pretty good idea of what I'm all about, for better or for worse. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, and that's all you ever want an endeavor to be, right? Just viable. Here's how you can help. First of all, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. And I hear you asking, what is Patreon? It's just a digital platform that allows you to directly support creative works that you dig. So you head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show, like the cost of a cup of coffee or something. It's basically, think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay, but you do just because you dig the show and you're not going to miss a few bucks every month. And over there, you can score a sweet Working Songwriter t-shirt designed by the one and only Pearl Rachinsky at Pearl Jr. to see her other stuff on Instagram. Beautiful designs. Also over there, if you're a subscriber to Patreon, you might just be able to hear the new podcast concept that I started with Tim from Strand of Oaks called the Oaks Chamber. The first episode of that is up, and I think we'll be doing it we'll do it now and then going into the future. Also over there, I'm going to be posting some check-in conversations with past guests of the show. I don't know what I'm going to call that yet, something like the Working Songwriter Reunion or the Working Songwriter Alumni, and we're just going to catch up with people who've been on the show before and see what they're up to. The first of those conversations will be next week with BJ Barham of American Aquarium. It's not quite up yet because we couldn't get our schedules to jive, but it's going to happen. We'll see what BJ's been up to. And if you can't sign up at Patreon to help out, if you're broke right now, I get it, man. Just throw us a rating over in the iTunes store, or just tell a buddy about the show. Just try to spread the word. That's all I ask. I'll end the harassment there. This is an episode I've been waiting to do for a minute, and it's funny. I always have my eye on people's touring schedules to see when they'll be through D.C. so that I can tape a show with them. And His Golden Messenger, man, they've been touring so much that I swear there have been like 4 different opportunities in the past calendar year. So that tells me how hard they've been hitting it. They're grinding, man. They're going after it, and that's great. And I'm so glad that even though they were super busy, they made time for our plucky little program here. So I drove down to a motel in Virginia day before yesterday near Wolf Trap, where they were supporting Jason Isbell the night before to tape this. And I'd like to shout out a very special thanks to his bandmate and a songwriter worth his salt in his own right, Phil Cook, for allowing me to crash their split motel room while he was showering for van call and tape this episode. That's a level of privacy invasion that I typically refrain from, but we couldn't help it this time. So thanks, Phil, and I hope you guys enjoy this chat. Peace. MC Taylor is the songwriter and creative spark for the North Carolina-based outfit His Golden Messenger. He was raised in Irvine, California. He got his start in the mid-90s with a hardcore band, Ex Ignota, and then went on to form a band with alt-country leanings called The Court and Spark. That band put out records over the course of a decade before hanging it up in 2007. That's when he embarked for North Carolina, where he would study folklore at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and begin recording the first His Golden Messenger album at his kitchen table directly into a tape recorder. He released the first few albums with Paradise of Bachelors and his own label, Heaven and Earth Magic Recording Company. The band stepped onto the national stage when they signed to Merge Records and released Lateness of Dancers to wide acclaim. They've appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman and Late Night with Seth Meyers. They've toured with the Drive-By Truckers, Mumford & Sons, and later this year, they'll be supporting John Prine at the Ryman in Nashville. Pitchfork has noted of his songs, Taylor's constant theme has been joy in the face of misery, jubilation during times of tribulation, hope despite the tide. NPR has described his sound as one of rock's most naturally self-flagellating voices, a rueful, weary readiness that makes the tensions in his songs pull that much harder. And Amanda Petrusich, writing in The New Yorker, has said of his songwriting, I'll venture that listeners who routinely grapple with some degree of existential anxiety will find Taylor's songs to be a particular kind of balm. If there's a void, it is almost certain that he has locked eyes with it. Earlier this month, in a motel somewhere in Virginia, I sat down with MC Taylor to talk about his musical journey so far. Thompson I'm pretty scarred, bro.
I know I used to do a ton of interviewing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For what?
I used to work as a folklorist for the state of North Carolina.
Right, and you went to school for that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I did tons of interviews and lost some too.
So
but also I did a lot of transcription. So I'm assuming you transcribe your own interviews.
No, because they don't end up.
You don't have.
It's just audio
people are not
format.
reading them.
Yeah.
Transcription nearly killed me. That I would say that's what stopped me from doing so much of that work.
I bet, man. And well, maybe you were 10 years late for that because there's probably a freaking app that does it now.
And I was on the hunt for that then. In fact, I bought a few different things that never really worked. But it's about 8 hours of work per 1 hour.
No, thank you. That's Chinese water torture, man.
Yeah, it's pretty deadly.
So you were literally working for the state of North Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
What were you hired to do?
They did what they called cultural surveys, and they did it by county. So at that time, there was a push to do this kind of survey work out in the eastern part of the state, which is not had not really been documented the way that the mountainous region had.
Yeah, when you think of Carolina, you think of the Smokies.
You think of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so I was kind of out in the flats of the state. It was incredible work. I loved it.
Is that you, like, literally just driving up to a house, knock, 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 hey, I'm Mike, I work for the state? Will you?
Well, I would start with, I wouldn't show up totally cold. I would start with a phone number, and, you know, I would usually have a contact in the county and ask them who were the best musicians. And everybody generally knew, because the places were so tiny that everyone kind of knew each other. So I would start that way, and it would take me a day to get a whole list of contacts, and I would go do that. So I did that for the North Carolina Arts Council, the Humanities Council, the Folklife Institute. There were a few organizations that would pay me.
That's a really cool, well, besides the transcription part, that's a really cool job.
Yeah, the work was amazing. Yeah, I loved it.
And where does that live now, that work?
Most of it lives in the state archives.
Okay.
Yeah. So occasionally they would put together programs using some of the stuff. So like I did, I was doing a bunch of work in Warren County, which is almost into Virginia, but not that far from where we live in Durham. And there were a bunch of programs that were going on the summer that I did that. So we were using some photos and recordings and having some of the musicians come and play and stuff like that.
What's the most striking story you heard from somebody who travels there?
Yeah, I felt like I was at that time, this was like, I want to say this was maybe 8 years ago. There seemed to have been an interest in like unaccompanied gospel quartets, African American gospel quartets. I mean, I think that tradition had never entirely stopped, and it has such a long history in that part of in the eastern part of North Carolina. But it seemed like there were a bunch of younger guys that had like gotten into this thing of like quartet singing and
without instruments.
Yeah, without instruments, and kind of like basing their whole vibe and certainly a repertoire on older stuff, like, you know, Mitchell's Christian Singers was a quartet from eastern North Carolina from the early part of the 20th century. Those recordings still exist, and, you know, it was clear that this was a sort of an unbroken chain.
Wow. That
just is kind of, no, you know, I knew about gospel quartet singing, but I'd never actually like went and heard it and experienced it in like a way that felt contemporary, not people dressing up and
right, and regionally specific.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. How did you end up at North Carolina to study folklore in the first place?
I had been in San Francisco for about 10 years, and my wife and I just felt like we needed to change. We both had jobs, but we were kind of moving laterally through our lives. We were having a hard time conceiving of how we would do things that seemed like adults should be able to do, like have kids, buy a house. That stuff wasn't really available to us and where we were in our lives in San Francisco, and it didn't seem like things were going to really change.
Yeah, I don't think there's much work in San Francisco for interviewing gospel quartets.
No. No. So, I don't know, we just kind of took a leap. It's funny to think about because I had been through North Carolina on tour, but never through Durham or the Triangle. I had been to Asheville, but we almost I mean, it was a real leap of faith. We just kind of said, let's move. Let's go do something different. We didn't have kids then. And, I mean, we didn't even have, we were like using, I don't know. We didn't do a ton of research.
Well, you know, if you were just throwing a dart at the map, it looks like the dart landed in a pretty damn good place, man. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's been sort of cosmically incredible that we ended up where we did. You know, we moved to a place where we knew nobody, literally no people.
Wow.
And
that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, you realize when you make a move like that and you're in your 30s. I was in my early 30s, and you know, the muscles that you use to make friends are pretty atrophied by then. So that was the thing. Like, and we didn't realize it till we got there. Like, I mean, we obviously understood that we didn't know anybody in North Carolina, right. But then it was a question of how do we meet friends and make connections with people that, you know, like we had in our, in California.
When my wife and I moved to Austin, pretty much cold like that 10 years ago, and it legit took us 2 years to have a friend group. I mean, we made friends along the way, but it took 2 years for it to be Saturday night, and we had like more than one friend to call. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the same thing. I mean, but it kind of, we, you know, on the other hand, we just kind of slid into our friendships, and now, you know, our relationships with people in North Carolina are as deep as any I've had in my life. So then it's also like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
But, you know, one thing I should mention is that it was important for me to live in the South. So wherever we were going to move, I knew that it was going to be in the South.
Why is that?
Because I had spent so much time kind of studying, in quotes, Southern cultures. Like, music obviously has always, you know, been a really important part of, like, music from the South. Vernacular music from the South has always been a big part of what informs the thing that I do. Even when I lived in California, it was a big part of it. But, you know, there's all, you know, Southern foodways, literature, that has always been something that I felt connected to. So I felt like if we're going to move, I want to move to the South, because there's the only way to move this interest forward is to actually live in this place. I'm never going to understand it unless I live there.
Yeah, and even then it might be tough.
I mean, I still am not a native. I'm not from there.
Yeah.
However, I have a deep and abiding love for the place, and I have a much deeper perspective on it than I did before I lived there, certainly.
Absolutely, man. What were you... So were you specifically studying the folklore of the South at Carolina, and were you with a specific professor that you went through, or were you kind of writing your own ticket while you were there?
I mean, it's, you know, the folklore program at UNC was interesting to me because they foregrounded field work, which, you know, they wanted us to be out in the world talking to people.
Yeah.
And there aren't very many folklore programs anymore. There was one at Penn for a long time. There's one in Bloomington, at Indiana. But all of the folklore programs that exist had, you know, varying degrees of engagement with field work. Some were very research heavy.
Right.
But I wanted to be talking to people and kind of out and seeing the world in that way. But I mean, it was, you know, Southern only insofar as that's where we were, you know.
Right.
Like we were in North Carolina, and so I could drive 45 minutes and talk to somebody.
What are, if someone hasn't had any experience with folklore before in their life, well, obviously they have just through growing up in stories like that, but what would be a couple works that they should read? What would be the best way to get into that?
Oh, man.
The best gateway drug? One or two books?
Geez.
Doesn't have to be definitive, but just off the top of your head.
I mean, it's hard to, I think, folklorists would all have differing opinions about this. The type of folklore work that I have always been drawn to has been, there's a Studs Terkel book called Working.
Okay.
That is basically a thick book that is just people that he interviewed talking about what they did for a living.
That's really cool.
And it's beautiful. Another piece that I don't think most people would think of as folklore right off the top of their head is a book that is probably my favorite book in any genre, called Up in the Old Hotel by Joseph Mitchell. And Joseph Mitchell, also a North Carolina native, coincidentally, but he was a feature writer for The New Yorker starting in the 1920s or 30s.
Okay.
So he lived in Manhattan, and so he kind of like spent his 20s up until he passed away, just kind of with the people in New York. If you haven't read the book, it's Up in the Old Hotel is a compilation of all his work, so it's like another thick one. He's got a lot of other books, but Up in the Old Hotel is the collected works, and it's stunning. And I don't know, I mean, I guess I would consider it folklore because it's kind of just about sort of workaday lives of people, just kind of what they do, how they like circle their wagons, how they put together community, and what things are important in their communities, like sort of what are the totems in their communities that they consider important.
What things are held sacred.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what things are profane. Well, here, I want to go backwards really quick. Here's something that you might learn if you were researching a podcast about His Golden Messenger. Did Jack Johnson make a feature film about your hardcore band? Actually, back in the day, I came across that and I said, "What the hell? What was that scene going on?"
It wasn't a feature film; it's a short film.
Okay.
I did my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And Jack was a freshman when I was. Like, we were part of the same friend group. So, I mean, when he made that, he was a film major. He got his degree in film. I'm almost positive. He's a great filmmaker.
Really?
Yeah.
Right on.
He was a surf filmmaker. He was like a professional surfer. Even when he came to college, he's from Hawaii. Yeah. So.
But can you speak a little? What was that your first band, Ex Ignota?
Ex Ignota was a hardcore band I was in from age 18 to 19. I mean, it was pretty formative in a lot of ways, but it was short-lived.
Right on. Well, I'm an East Coast guy. I grew up right outside of D.C., so hardcore was always part of the vernacular around here. But how did you hear it out there on the West Coast? What were you listening to at that time?
Well, I mean, there was tons of Discord stuff that I loved, and even some of the not Discord stuff. Like there was. But I loved Rites of Spring was a huge one for me. I loved Fugazi, of course. There was a record label out in California, based in San Diego, called Discord, called Gravity, that I really loved, and bands on that record label were really influenced by like Nation of Ulysses, if you remember that band. Nation of Ulysses was a Discord band that was quite fashionable, which, like they dressed up in a way.
Oh, you mean like literally stylish?
Stylish.
Okay.
They were stylish. which really rubbed a lot of people in that world the wrong way. But I thought it was great. It was so provocative in its way. But I feel like Nation Ulysses was kind of one of Ian Savonius was the singer of that band.
Okay.
They like what they were doing here in DC kind of made its way to California and took a different shape. But I don't know, it's like I said, I've been thinking about that time in my life more lately. And it was like I said, it was a short period of time, but my brain was so receptive at that time. It was so unformed. There were no musical rules in my brain. Like, I came to it as a listener first and foremost. I didn't start playing music until a little bit later. So I was wide open.
Yeah.
I was wide open, and I didn't have the like sort of musical boundaries that I feel like I do now, that I'm trying to fight against every day.
So how do you get back to that place, I guess, is the question,
I don't know. I just think that certainly in terms of my listening habits, I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I'm just trying to find a way to connect with music that articulates something that I feel in myself. And sometimes that's going to be, it's going to be an Ann Peebles song. Sometimes it's going to be a Fugazi song. Sometimes it's going to be an Eric Clapton song. You know what I mean? And it's just like, our lives are too short to like have these rules about what we should and what kind of art we should and shouldn't be around.
If you want to be a stylish hardcore band, then fucking be a stylish hardcore band, man.
Yeah. So I don't know. We all have that, like those boundaries that we sort of erect for ourselves as we're figuring out who we are can actually be helpful in some ways, because they tell us, well, this is what I'm not. I'm not this kind of whatever it would be, connoisseur of art. This is the stuff I like over here. And by liking this stuff, that should convey this information to you about me.
Yes.
But the older we get, I don't know, the less I need. I don't need that stuff, really.
I totally hear that in what you're doing, because when I listen to, I've been able to find some of that Exit Notice stuff. I listen to that and go, cool, this is like a band doing a hardcore thing. I listen to Court and Spark, I'm like, this is great. This is like a band interested in alt country. And then I jumped on his Golden Messenger boat with Lateness of Dancers, which I think a lot of people did. And there, I just hear I hear someone who is just making something that's very idiosyncratic. I mean, trite way to put it, but you just found your voice, it sounds like to me, with it. Like, totally found your own voice, and that's what the last 3 or 4 records have been. Yeah. Does it feel like that to you at all, or do you still feel like you're searching in a way?
It does. I mean, I feel like for me, this trip started with a record called Bad Debt that I made, which was a few records before Lateness. Lateness was the one that a lot of people heard for the first time, I think, because that was the first record I made for Merge.
Yeah.
But I feel like I unlocked something with Bad Debt. And so I think of like Bad Debt, Poor Moon came after that. Mm-hmm. A record called Ha came after that. And then Lateness, Hard Like a Levee. Mm-hmm. Hallelujah Anyhow.
It's been a long 7 or 8 years, man.
Yeah, it's been a busy one for sure. Yeah. But I feel like those are all kind of like chapters of the same book. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like certainly the same themes, same types of thinking about how I want a melody to work over a set of chords. Mm-hmm. That type of thing.
Yeah. I can hear that. Do you think finding your voice there, I'm really interested in this period in your life. So it sounds like Court and Spark ended around 2007, and then you move east.
Yeah.
Then you go into school, you're kind of becoming a father at that time. Can you talk about that transition period creatively and how you felt? Did you feel like you might walk away from music? Did you know that you were going to continue, but do it in a different way? Like, where was your headspace at that time in between?
Around 2007, which was when Court and Spark ended, that was a band that I had for almost 10 years. And when it was going, I thought of it as pretty serious, but it just, listening back to that stuff now, it's totally clear to me why it didn't, why it wasn't working, why it wasn't going to work, really.
What do you think those reasons are?
I mean, I just hadn't found my thing, you know? I hadn't found my thing yet. So it's, some of it tiptoes. It's like I'm not sure what to do thematically with some of the writing. I didn't know how to use my voice. You know, there's just all kinds of stuff.
But what's crazy is, like, when I listen to it, almost to me, it's only like a half a degree different, like a degree different, but that makes all the difference, right?
I mean,
there,
but
man.
that degree
like,
is
it's the whole
like,
thing.
That degree could be a centimeter long, but it might as well be from here to the moon. You know what I mean? Because if that degree that you're talking about is the difference between it feeling believable, then that's everything, you know. And I actually agree with you. The sort of constituent parts that I feel like I've been working with in my music haven't totally changed since Court and Spark.
Yeah.
It's still like trying to understand how to incorporate the things that I love about American music in a way that feels true and real and honest to me, you know. Not playing dress up.
Yeah.
You know, but actually adding to the story of American music in some tiny little way.
Over the years, I've thought about that last degree of difference between a song that's a thing and a song that's not a thing. The degree of difference between a song that's durable and celebrated versus just a piece of sonic flotsam. It can be really small, but that doesn't mean it's insignificant. Really, it's the whole ball game. Or as Mike put it succinctly, that degree could be a centimeter long, but it might as well be from here to the moon. People have made entire careers out of being able to recognize that last degree in a song. That would be one of the main talents of an iconic producer like Rick Rubin or T-Bone Burnett. I've heard Jay-Z's longtime engineer Young Guru talk about sitting in the studio with idols of his and after hours of work having to come in over the talkback mic and just say, "Hey fellas, this isn't it." Lorne Michaels built an entire comedy empire out of his singular ability to recognize that last degree in performers and writers. One of my favorite meditations on overcoming that last crucial degree of difference is from Annie Dillard's The Writing Life. In there she tells us, "One of the things I know about writing is this: spend it all, shoot it, play it, lose it, all, right away, every time. Do not hoard what seems good for a later place in the book or for another book. Give it all, give it now. The impulse to save something good for a better place later is the signal to spend it now. Something more will arise for later, something better. These things fill from behind, from beneath, like well water. Similarly, the impulse to keep to yourself what you have learned is not only shameful, it is destructive. Anything you do not give freely and abundantly becomes lost to you. you open the safe and find ashes. What was your experience with music growing up? Did you grow up in kind of a musical family at all? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought of it as a musical family. My dad is a singer and he's a guitar player, and he's a great singer. He has a very different voice from mine. But so he still has a Martin D28 that he bought in 1964 that is the most beautiful sounding guitar to me. I mean, for purely emotional reasons.
Of course.
But he did a lot of singing and playing around the house. He would get hired to play at weddings occasionally.
Yeah.
He was a school teacher. He was a public school teacher, as was my mom. And, I think that I'm sure that he wished that he would have kept playing. I don't know. That's a tricky topic. I don't know. He does. If you're daydreaming about being an artist for a living, but you haven't actually gotten into like the nuts and bolts of it, people, including my dad, don't realize how gnarly it is.
It can be pretty unforgiving. Yeah. I mean, there's some high highs, but there's some low lows.
Yeah.
Also, though, with that generation, so my dad played in bands in the D.C. area till he was about my age, basically till he had me and had to figure it out money-wise. And I think I don't think regret would be the right words for it because he's, we got a great family and all that. But, I think he does wonder what it would have been like.
Right.
But in their generation, there was no middle-class bands happening. You were either Neil Young or you were the guy playing the open mic. And there wasn't a lot of I don't know, I don't feel like you could be a band going around playing the Cat's Cradles of the world because that didn't really exist in every town.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it, though. I don't know that my dad has lived with regret. I think that he just wonders. Certainly, he wonders. Yeah. I mean, things were as much as things kind of were the same back then, they were also different. Like my dad is not a songwriter. He was kind of coming up in when like the folk boom was happening in Southern California, which is where he and my mom lived. It was kind of one of the ground zeros of that. So there was a lot of Peter, Paul, and Mary energy happening. And he went to the same high school that the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band guys did, and Steve Martin and all that. So there was a lot of that thing. A lot of those people went on to have great careers, and some didn't. A lot of them had to figure out how to write songs.
Yeah, well, but at that time, like the Peter, Paul, and Mary time, like I feel like it wasn't uncommon if you were in that folk scene to just be like, to do all covers, to like interpret songs. Like that's a vibe that doesn't really happen now.
We talk about that actually because, even like at that time and going on for like the next 10 years, you had someone like Chris Christopherson who had his own career.
Yes.
But then there were other peers and contemporaries of his that were singing his songs completely just because they were great songs.
I don't know why there isn't more of that now, but because there's this whole community of people playing music. I mean, just look at a 5-year chunk of who's played the Newport Folk Festival. It's like these people that are playing this specific style of music. Nobody plays each other's stuff. Whereas back then, I mean, what was it? Waylon cut a whole record of Billy Joe Shaver's songs. I mean, he did a whole record of someone else's songs.
Yeah.
It's a trip.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Talk to me about, it seems like you've had a pretty long musical relationship from Ex Ignota all the way up until now with Scott Hirsch.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what it's like to have a musical partnership that lasts that long. Why has that lasted as long as it has?
That's a great question. I mean, Scott has been, he's been a very important part of my life for a long time.
I mean, typically creative partnerships, they can be really volatile. You know what I mean? So they can bear fruit a lot at once, and then they go dry in different
I don't. Maybe part of it is because we're both kind of bad communicators, so we never said the terrible things that ended the relationship. We kind of just passive aggressively
move along,
pass by each other. No, but I don't know. I think part of it is that he and I have inhabited different roles in each other's creative lives over the time. So when I first met him, he was a guitar player that, a lot of us looked up to. He was like the one guy that could play. Mm-hmm. And so I was someone that had a lot of desire and emotion for it, but none of the skills. I mean, I actually remember sitting with him with the first electric guitar that I ever had, trying to figure out how to change the strings on the guitar. I mean, it was that. Yeah. I was that green. And so we kind of we grew together in a really beautiful way, actually. Like it's really I feel very lucky to have had the experience of really growing up with somebody.
It's pretty uncommon.
That. Because we met each other when we were 17. And like I said, I didn't know anything about being in a band. He did. And so I learned so much from him. And my own interests and skill sets started to morph and change. And one band ended, and it was kind of like, let's go do something else. Mm-hmm. It still wasn't so serious. There was no money involved. It was just like, what else can we do? Like our musical tastes are evolving together. We live with each other. Like what else could we do that would feel honest and kind of like it would press all the buttons that we want to press right now? And I don't know, that just kept on happening. It just kept on happening because Scott was in Ex Ignota with me, and then he was in Court and Spark. With Court and Spark, I sort of developed into a songwriter. Like I was the primary songwriter of that band. I felt like if I was going to have a life in music, I probably needed to be a songwriter because I don't really have the thing that is gonna lead me to be like a really ripping guitar player or a virtuoso. You know what I mean? Like that's just not. It's not in my DNA. Even if my head, my like upper consciousness is saying like you're gonna be a virtuoso. Yeah. My body is just like, no, you're not.
Yeah, well, I mean, and with that, there's just some guys. It's like basketball players. Some guys just have this jump out of the gym talent that you, no matter how many hours in the gym you put in, or shredding in your bedroom, you're not going to catch up. Yeah,
But also, just that wasn't important to me. Like I just, I grew up an avid reader, a totally omnivorous reader. I still am. I'm still like spend as much time as I can in used bookstores and stuff. So, there was also like the language component of music that I loved that, frankly, a lot of people around me they didn't really care. I mean, it's not like they didn't care, but it was kind of words were kind of an afterthought. And I was like, I was an English major. I grew up like a complete bookworm, spending my summer days laying on my bed reading books from the age of like 7 onwards. So to me, it's like music is a really beautiful way to present language.
It is.
And I still feel that way. And I think that's what has kept me at it, honestly, is like, how do I say this thing that I want to say as elegantly as I can for this moment in my life?
That's the word. And when you get that eloquent or that elegant phrase and it's matched with a melody, it's a dagger, man. Mm-hmm. It's the best dagger on the face of the planet. How is your writing style changed in the last 20 years of writing? What's most different about you now writing than, let's say, in the year 2000? Has it changed?
Yeah. There are things that I don't try to do anymore.
Such as?
I mean, I'm not generally speaking a narrative songwriter.
Right.
In the way that most people think. Like, I'm not really telling a story in my songs. There's a story in there that I know.
Right.
But I feel like I'm generally singing vignettes or scenes that I know about and that I feel like people are going to recognize also.
Yes. Well, and that's funny to me because listening to his stuff, all of that stuff is a narrative to me. But I think that's just what happens with listeners. If you put vignettes in there, of course they're going to start drawing lines between them.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're leaving a space for them to participate and create when it's so impressionistic like that.
I think that's right. I mean, I like, I'm always hesitant to explain what the songs are about.
Of course,
But there seems to be a big push now in sort of music writing or whatever, where they get an artist to explain every song on the record. I think that's so crazy. I can understand the like sort of instant gratification of being asked to do that, but that's just not. That's not what music is for. In my humble opinion, that's not really how we're supposed to deal with the music.
I think not wanting to describe your stuff kind of got a bad rap because Dylan was so famously like coy about everything. And he was kind of a dick about it, but it's like he had a reason for doing it. It wasn't just him being capricious. Like he knew what he was doing, not wanting to explain that stuff. Right. And I agree. It's a total instant gratification thing. Like, oh, cool. I went to Pitchfork. I read what the specific thing was in that person's life, and now I'm bummed out and I don't want to listen to that song again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only that, but instant gratification for the person that made the record too.
Yeah.
There's always a part of us, no matter how reticent we are to talk, that thinks like, maybe I'll get a chance just to explain exactly what everything is on and what everything means on this record and put all the pieces in place for people. But that's sort of the mystery is the most important part of any piece of art. And so if you get rid of that, there's not a ton left there to keep anyone around.
It kind of becomes like a nice trick at that point. You're like,
sort of.
Cool. Yeah.
So I resist that as much as possible, and it's not me trying to be difficult. It's just I need to retain that feeling of mystery, certainly for listeners and especially for myself too. If I articulate what a song is about on paper, I'm never going to be able to get rid of that in my head. And frankly, my songs in my head evolve over time.
Yeah.
The songs on Lateness of Dancers mean something different to me now than they did then. And we have to let the songs be able to grow and change. We have to grow up with them.
And you can't grow up with them if you've articulated it too explicitly.
That's sort of what I think. I don't know.
I think that too. I'm working on something. What I'm working on right now is, for many years I've written a song and I don't know quite what it means, and so I go back and rewrite it to lay it out in what I consider to be perfect. But man, that second draft, the guy I'm working with right now is just like, man, these fucking second drafts are awful. They're too explicit, like I put a bow on so many things, and I'm trying to get better as I get older to just don't know quite what it means, but this is what came out. It felt good when I was writing it the first time.
Yeah.
I'm going to let sleeping dogs lie here.
Yeah. I think second guessing, so we all second guess ourselves.
Yeah.
Because that feels like, we've been taught to distrust things that feel too easy.
Yeah.
But easy, I think, is maybe not the right word for it. Like easy and natural have become interchangeable. But so yeah, we've been taught to distrust something that comes too quickly. But I find that like some of my best songs have showed up in 15 minutes, and yeah, it really is kind of a scenario where you're like, no way,
right?
There's no way that this is going to be something that I'm going to live with now for the rest of my life. It just like it came in like 10 or 15 minutes. I can't trust it.
It's almost, I've only had a couple come to me in about 15 minutes, but when it does come, you have the feeling of like, you're going to bed that night and you're like, that song didn't exist when I woke up this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's here. Like I have it. I have this new baby that I wouldn't expect. And that's a great feeling.
It is. It's really special.
When you're off the road, do you make time, like, do you have specific days where you're like, this is a writing day, I'm sitting down and writing, or is it more catch as catch can? I got a few free hours.
It's a little bit of both. When I am not on the road, I'm generally in my office writing every day, but, it's not really every day. It's like my brain and body badly wants distraction. So I might like point myself towards my office, and then we'll get sidetracked by a record or a book or something that I need, quote unquote, to do. But my intention is to be writing all the time, because I don't want the writing to feel precious. That's when things get really hard for me, is when I have set aside, the most surefire way to not come up with something is to set aside 2 hours on Friday.
Right.
To do it. There's just no way that's going to happen. But, I can write I can come up with the bones for 5 songs if I've smoked a little pot a couple hours ago. My kids are running around the house. I'm sitting up in the living room, kind of half thinking, strumming on a guitar. That's where a lot of stuff comes from. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then my job is like to sort of chase that stuff down and make it actually give it the form that it was asking for.
Sure.
I have done a couple writing trips in the past year or so. I went up to Levon Helm's barn with my buddy Josh Kaufman, and we did some writing up there.
He's the best, man. What a guitar player and what a musician. Really
and that was actually really great. It was really great to do that, because I wasn't writing for myself. We were writing for Amy, Levon's daughter. And I don't know, that changed it somehow. I actually felt like I could write in a different way, sort of, than...
Totally. You were writing for a different voice, right. Literally. Yeah.
The funny thing is, looking at those words now, it's like, those just look like, I don't know, there's nothing different about those words. Right. But in my head, they came quicker, I think, because I knew I'm not going to have to sing these things every night. I don't have to have the relationship with the words. But, so I did that, and then I've been up to Virginia a couple times to do some writing, and that's also been really cool. I don't know.
Is it with the Space Bomb guys?
I did do some stuff up there, but I did there's a place called Arrington, Virginia, that is about 30 miles outside of Charlottesville, and it's the land that is owned by this festival called Lock-In. Yeah,
I've heard of that.
And they have just been kind enough to let me come stay and a cabin there, like in the off season, and just write. I'm very thankful to them for that.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Well, look, you got a van call coming up here before we close the interview. Can we just spend 30 seconds talking about you're traveling with the greatest drummer in the world, J.T. Bates?
Sure.
I'm a founding member of the J.T. Bates fan club with my buddy Frankie Lee.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Okay, sure. Well, this will open up a little conversation about the other people I'm with. Because Phil Cook is sitting about 10 feet from us.
Ladies and gentlemen, that shower you heard in the background, if you ever wanted to hear Phil Cook shower, you have.
I'm in my underwear right now.
I get to hear Phil Cook shower every morning. The only person I hear shower more than Phil Cook is my wife. That's a special place that you
knows it too.
And she knows it. So I met J.T. Bates through Phil Cook because Phil, who plays guitar and keys in His Golden Messenger and has for many years, since 2012, Philly?
I think 2012, maybe 13.
12 or 13.
It's been 5 years for sure.
Yeah. Phil also runs his own band called Phil Cook and the Guitar Heels. They just put a record out a month or so ago.
People Are My Drug.
People Are My Drug. Record. That is truly beautiful. And His Golden Messenger has basically become the Guitar Heels with me singing. So Phil started playing with JT a few years ago when he was doing was it the Blind Boys thing?
Yeah.
When he was doing some work with the Blind Boys of Alabama. We've had a couple different drummers. The like cast of characters in Hiss is kind of it's certainly a family. And, people come, float in and out. You might, someone might see one version of the band one night, and the very next night it might be profoundly different.
Yeah.
That's how JT ended up. He's been with us since May.
He's wonderful. I first heard him play. I was playing this short-lived radio program in Minneapolis or St. Paul called Real Phonic Radio Hour, and they had a house band. He was in the house band, and I sound checked a song, and it's the only time in my life that I said to a sound engineer, I was like, could I get some snare in my monitor? He just sounded so good and fit in seamlessly.
Yeah.
You're on the road. Thank you for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Glad to do it. Yeah.
That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. His Golden Messenger's latest album is entitled Hallelujah Anyhow, available anywhere digital music is sold or streamed. Today's episode was engineered and mixed by Matt Schusler. Research and editorial direction provided by the intrepid and thorough Paul Barbagallo. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.